There is a day. For most men it's specific, even if they can't name the exact date. Something happened or something was noticed, and after that, the relationship with time was never quite the same. Not because of fear, because of honesty. The honest understanding finally felt, rather than just known, that the time available is not infinite. And that understanding changes everything. I want to try to describe what that day actually feels like, because it's rarely dramatic. It doesn't arrive with a diagnosis or a tragedy, though sometimes those things bring it. More often it comes in something ordinary. A birthday that lands differently than the others. A parent's face that suddenly looks older than expected. A photograph from 10 years ago, when the man looking back at you seems like someone from another lifetime. And that moment, in that moment, quiet, unremarkable from the outside, in that moment something shifts. Not fear exactly, not grief exactly, more like the world becoming more solid, more real, more weight-bearing. The awareness settling in, not as a thought, but as something physical. That this life is happening once. That the years already passed are not coming back. That the years ahead are not unlimited. And that between those two facts is the only territory that actually exists now. The now is the only thing that actually exists. I think every man has a version of this day. And what's interesting is how different the response can be. Some men meet it with urgency, suddenly wanting to do everything at once, restless in a way that didn't exist before, making changes, starting things, trying to compress what feels like lost time into the time remaining. Other men meet it with stillness, a settling, quieting, as if the weight of the realization has finally given them permission to stop moving quite as fast. And others still, maybe the most common response, meet it with a kind of temporary awareness that gradually fades. The day arrives, the understanding is real, and then the routines resume, and the urgency gets filed away. And the life continues as before, until the next version of the day arrives, and it always arrives again. But here is the strange part. Most men treat the realization that time is running out as a reason to do more, to accelerate, to add, to pursue all the things that were deferred or avoided before the window closes. And sometimes that's right. I'm not saying it's not. But most men misunderstand what the realization is actually asking. This is the point here. Because the day you feel time running out is not primarily an invitation to do more. I believe it's an invitation to choose more carefully. There's a difference. Doing more is adding more to the list. Choosing more carefully is different. Choosing more carefully is looking at the list honestly and asking which things on it are actually worth the time they cost. Which relationships deserve more of you than you're getting? and which work genuinely matters to the person doing it. Which version of the day, of this specific, unrepeatable day, is worth inhabiting. And most men, when they feel the running out of time, they reach for quantity. When what the moment is actually offering them, I think it's the gift of discernment. The clarity to finally see what is worth the time they have left. Here is something I thought about a lot. Before the realization, before the day arrives, most men live in a kind of temporal abundance. Time is treated like a renewable, because every deferred thing can be picked up later. Every neglected relationship can be repaired eventually. And every version of yourself you haven't become yet is still somewhere ahead, available when circumstances allow. And this abundance, which is mostly an illusion, makes a particular kind of laziness possible. That laziness is possible only for this reason. Not laziness about work. Men in this audience are rarely lazy about work. But it's a laziness about the essential things. I'm talking about the conversations that were always going to happen someday. The presence that was always going to be fuller when things settled. And the version of yourself, more honest, more alive, more genuinely there, that was always going to emerge when the time was right. And then the day arrives, and abundance is exposed as what it actually was. A story, just a story. And what replaces it is something more useful, if more uncomfortable. Urgency. Not the panic of scarcity, but the clarity of the man who finally understands that the life he is living right now is the only one available. Not the preparation, the thing itself. And this is where things become even more interesting. Because that clarity, as uncomfortable as it is one of the most valuable things time can offer a man. And this is why something changes after 40 and after 50 in how a man experiences the people he loves. Before the realization, relationships often feel like fixtures. Stable, reliable, always there. Something to return to after the work is done. But after the day, after the honest awareness of time, the people start to feel different, more fragile, not in a frightening way, in a way that precious things are fragile. The conversation with a parent becomes something held more carefully, because the number of those conversations is no longer assumed to be large. The evening with someone you love carries more weight than it did before. Not because anything is wrong, because you finally Understand that these evenings are not a backdrop of your life. They are your life. And the man who has had that day, who has genuinely felt the finiteness of time, often finds that what changes most is not his ambition or his goals or his plans. It's the quality of his attention in the ordinary moments. The moments that were always there, that he was always, partially at least, somewhere else for. Here is the thing about time that I keep returning to. The awareness that time is running out is not the enemy of a good life. It is one of its essential ingredients. Because without that awareness, without the genuine felt understanding of finitude, almost every important thing can be deferred. The hard conversation, the honest expression of love, the work that actually matters, the version of yourself you keep meaning to become. And all of it survives on the assumption of later. And later, that uncomfortable, reliable, always available later, is the single greatest obstacle to actually living. The men who seem most fully present in their lives, the ones who seem most genuinely themselves, most honest in their relationships, most willing to be affected by the ordinary, they're almost always men who have had that day, who have felt the weight of time and let it do its work on them. Not by surrendering to fear, by surrendering to the illusion of abundance and choosing every day, imperfectly, but genuinely, to treat the time they have as the finite, irreplaceable, worth attending to thing it actually is. I want to ask you something. Have you had your day yet? The one where time stopped feeling like a background assumption and started feeling like something actual, something with weight and direction and limit. If you have, if you know exactly the moment I'm describing here, if you know it, I want to ask you what it changed. Not what you decided to do differently, not what plans you made. What actually changed in how you showed up, in how you listened, in how you made the ordinary choices of where your attention goes. Because that's what the day is really for. Not to produce a plan, or a list, or a reinvention, but to change the quality of presence in whatever comes next. And if you haven't had that day yet, if the finiteness of time is still mostly intellectual, still something you know about, without yet fully feeling. Let's say this. In that case, I'm not going to tell you to manufacture it, because it will come in its own way, at its own time, through something ordinary that lands differently, through a face or a photograph or a Tuesday morning that suddenly shows you the truth you've been managing to avoid. And when it comes, let it. Don't rush past it. Don't file it under things to process later. Stay with it long enough to let it change something. To let it change something. Because the day man realize time is running out is not the beginning of loss. It is the beginning of seriousness. A man who has had that day, who has genuinely allowed the definiteness of his life to become real rather than theoretical, that man makes different choices. Not dramatic choices, not necessarily visible ones, but choices that are more aligned with what he actually values. More weight given to the relationships that matter. More honesty in the moments that call for it. More willingness to be present, fully, without the buffer of distraction in the life that is happening right now. And less time spent on the things that were never worth the hours they cost. Less performance for the audiences that never really mattered. Less careful maintenance of a version of himself that was paid for someone else's approval. The realization that time is finite doesn't make a man smaller. It makes him more precise, more himself, more able to live in the direction of what actually matters, because he finally understands that the direction needs to be chosen now, not someday, now. I think about time differently now, not with dread, not with sadness most of the time, but with the kind of attention I didn't have before. The awareness that this walk, this specific morning, this light, this air is here once, just once. That the people I see today are offering me something that won't be offered from exactly this moment ever again. And that the version of myself who shows up to meet them, present or distracted, honest or performing, is a choice made right now, in this moment, and in the next one, and the one after that. That's what the day gave me. Not fear, the understanding that now is the only time that matters. Let me know in the comments what you think. And let me know if you liked this video by hitting the like button. And if you want to be with me in the next video, in my next walk with my dog, you will find the video here. And check if you're subscribed. I'll see you there.